All Things Data podcast. In the spirit of Daniel Kahneman, Peter Diamandis, and Google Moonshots, brings together leading data scientists, technologists, business model experts, and futurists to discuss how to utilize, harness, and deploy data science and data-driven strategies to enable digital transformation. The hosts are Dr. Manjeet Rege, Associate Professor of Data Science, and Dan Yarmala, Director of Business Development of IoT and Data Science. The podcast is produced by the Graduate Programs of Software of the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota.
One question I have is bottleneck to adoption and rollout. We can figure that regulatory authorities have to figure out ways to regulate. Entrenched interests definitely want the financial or friction to get their piece of the pie in the economic puzzle. But barring those hurdles, what do you think is the bottleneck to adoption and rollout?
So people are used to a regulator. People are used to somebody standing behind a currency. For the time immemorial, currencies were always issued by governments or our authority behind them. This is the first time it's going to be a peer-to-peer currency where masses decide the price of this. So one bottleneck is lack of a government saying it's okay to buy a cryptocurrency or be involved with cryptocurrencies. And you would see that the moment a regulator says something, the price goes down. When the a regulator of a particular country, like in Australia, and even in Canada, they don't restrict it. They haven't come out against it. But if tomorrow morning there was a statement by a regulator in Canada saying this seems to be like a fraud, I don't think people should buy it. You will see a sellout, like 8%.
Which
down right away.
With the South Korean government, right? That caused the first dip. And then there was kind of like a moral outrage by the South Koreans, and it kind of went back up. And then it's this volatility wave that we're riding here.
So what is happening here? Notice that masses are fighting the old way. There's a real need for fluidity of value, that people should be able to transfer value to each other in a much faster way. At the risk of digressing, because of blockchain or bitcoins or cryptocurrencies allow people to transfer value at the speed of information, that actually boosts the economic activity and economic potential of the world as a whole to multiple scale. But that governments don't want to, and for some right reasons, should not lose complete control of the financial system of the world. So I think the earlier question that you asked is, what is the main problem? The main problem is governments don't understand this yet. They're still waiting and watching mode. They're not going to cede control to a peer-to-peer economy because currency is the main control that the government has on its country. If governments have no control on currencies, then it's a huge problem with the way the capitalistic economy functions. So this is a fundamental dig at how capitalistic economies work. There is a hope in this, and that is that governments are going to finally, and that's my own personal reading and could change tomorrow, but so far I believe the way it's going, I think you will see a digital dollar. I think you will see a digital yen. And I think eventually what will happen is all these currencies will be, you will see less and less of paper money and less and less depends upon banks. Their roles are going to change. They're not going to disappear, but their roles are going to change drastically. And there will be a peer-to-peer economy as well, but that's going to be at more limited scale. Still higher than today because only 1% of the world or 2% of the world is actually involved in any kind of cryptocurrencies. It's total economy, the world's total economy is over $40 trillion. And Bitcoin all cryptocurrencies was 500 billion, which is almost drop in the bucket. There would be government involvement, but they won't cede control. Not the way it's looking.
I want to just step back a little bit and talk, go back to blockchain a little bit. We had this interesting discussion about Bitcoin, which is one application. Are there other mainstream applications of blockchain like the one that we just discussed?
So initially, you will have some fundamental things that will be transformed. First of all, titles, land titles. That would be one of the things that's going to get changed. I think all banking products, derivatives, bonds, any kind of asset which is a paper asset is going to get attacked first by blockchain technologies, by fintech companies. Even music. Music is now an electronic file. You would have, I think there are ICOs that I saw that are floating around for artists to create their own music and sell it to masses per year charge. Like you could pay 1 cent for every time you hear the song, rather than going through a music company and then there's CDs and you go to the store, or you buy it, or even download that music through Apple or whatever. There's the intermediaries will be removed in that. So those are the low-hanging fruit. Titles is the most important one.
If there's a listener out there working at any company, wondering whether blockchain would be appropriate for me or for my business, how can companies identify which part of their businesses can be transformed, maybe by blockchain?
So very good question. And I would say this: if there is an asset, or if you are the middleman in any transaction, then you are in line of disruption. Now, with how soon or how fast that's going to happen, that depends upon the particular industry. But if you individually, or you as a company, or your company that you work for is a middleman in any transaction, then you are a target. And you could also find efficiencies within the company where you are on one end of a transaction where you are slowed down by middlemen. You will also be affected, but in a good way, that you will now have more speed to transactions, and you have another tool that you could use.
Raj, can you give us some examples of some blockchain applications that you right now that are being worked on, or you've heard about that you're like, yeah, this is good?
There are two types of implementations going on right now. One is very public blockchain implementations and lots of ICOs floating around. And to be quite honest with you, it's a cause of worry, the amount of money people are getting for blockchain implementations that actually have no basis in reality. I don't want to use fraud is a strong word, but it's in that direction, I would say. Implementation-wise, fintech, any financial product, or there are implementations in real estate for the title of for houses. There are blockchain implementations within enterprises for removing middlemen. But publicly, music is the most important one. I think and then media. Any media, it could be movies, artwork that you have created, even for this podcast, for example. When you put it out there, that's media that you could then turn around and then monetize. So there are implementations of blockchain that's happening on that side that I'm very excited about.
One thing that's pivoting a little bit here on the subject is about security. We hear you can't hack a blockchain, and at the same time, I read about people getting hacked. Can you clarify that whole situation there?
I'm in cybersecurity, and I'll tell you this, that a blockchain by itself is unhackable. And that's a strong word, and I'll tell you why. Because the way it's built, it's for security. Security was the main reason this was built. The way it gets hacked is a privacy problem rather than a security problem. So, for example, Bitcoins that were stolen from a South Korean exchange, okay? All the blockchain still sits on the traditional technology. You still have a username password. If I steal Don's username password and I just simply redirect your text, because there is a two-factor authentication, whenever suppose you have 7 Bitcoin, you would be rich. But I'm just saying, you have 7 Bitcoins right now. I know Dan has 7 Bitcoins, and I hack Dan's computer. I now get access to your username password. So I've compromised one person rather than the whole chain. That can happen. Somebody can steal your money, but you can't rob the bank. You know what I'm saying? One person or one set of people who have kept their Bitcoins or their assets in one place, and they still have access to that particular Bitcoin using traditional technology, web. When you access it, if you lose your username password, somebody else can then use that username password and get access to your Bitcoins. But that can happen that you see tomorrow morning, like it happened in Equifax's case, that somebody hacked into Equifax and stole everybody's information. That isn't possible. Is it a security problem? Yes. I would say it's more of a privacy problem, but you can call it a security problem. Bitcoin by itself, the technology is not hacked. Nodes could be compromised along the way. It balances out that suppose I were to append to a blockchain node, I cannot change any information. So only after, if I compromise your asset, then I would steal your Bitcoins. That's all I can do, but I cannot compromise the whole chain that everybody relies on.
Well, can't we do something like use like some easy tools like biometrics on top of this and two-factor authentication? I mean, what comes to mind as we're on this journey, Raj, for as a cybersecurity guy? What would you recommend people do as another level of protection?
So I think there's a lot of activity that is happening. What they're doing is KYC methodology that they have. There is a company out of Toronto that is working on digital IDs. They're actually, even Microsoft is working on their own digital IDs. Once you have a digital identification, even if your username and password is stolen, there are ways to retrieve that and then secure it back to yourself. Have you ever bought a Bitcoin, or Manjeet, you or Dan?
I have.
No.
What happens is you have to go through a rigorous KYC program, a know your customer program, where they actually take your picture, take your driver's license pictures, take your passport pictures, everything that you were told from past 20 years that you should never give out online, you give that out to be able to get an ID, to be able to buy a Bitcoin. But that's only North America. If you were to buy a Bitcoin in Isle of Man, those exchanges are not under those regulations. That means they don't have to verify you are who you say you are. So I think digital IDs are being floated by different companies, and then Dan can say, I'm going to use Microsoft Digital ID. That's my digital identification, which is based on my biometrics and based on my passport number, and based on these things. And this is the way I can always retrieve it. That will narrow down the fraud situation. It will not disappear. Fraud will also catch up with time, but what will happen is these technologies are going very fast.
So just to extend on that, Raj, earlier we spoke about frauds within a blockchain. If you have a series of transactions, exchange of hands going from A to Z, let's say two parties, A and B, are up to something, but not the rest of them. So which means the others cannot really see their transaction, and that because of the privacy issues. And A and B have decided to do some kind of a fraud, but from B onwards, there is no fraud. So even when, let's say I'm at an alphabet like P or a Q, fraud happened long back. I cannot see that, right? So, what do you have to say for something like that?
So what kind of fraud are you talking about? Suppose if there's a house and I sell it to Manjeet and saying, listen, I have sold it to you for $1 million, but we're going to write in this blockchain that I sold it to you for 940, so that I can save on taxes, whatever the case is.
Right.
So all that will happen is you can only append the record you are creating. If you are a legitimate member of that particular blockchain and you're buying it, and there's a history that the house was sold for 800, then 850, then 950. Now it should be sold, say, $1 million, 1.1. But now you come around and you sell it for 940, right? If you do that, then that's it. Then that's a fraud that will be limited to that. But everybody will see that there is an anomaly.
I see.
There's an anomaly there. There is no. I don't know what's the impact of that kind of a fraud. The only thing that will happen is if that is visible, that will be visible to your tax department also, and they will say, "Dude, why did you send this? Can you demonstrate what was the reason?" Things like those. Because everything else is also visible, that fraud doesn't bite as much.
I want to just talk about who invented blockchain, because there is some mystery about Satoshi Nakamoto and whether that person really exists or not. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So what happened was, I think there was a paper 1993 as well that spoke of a similar technology, not really blockchain, where there was a way to immute and also insert trust in a transaction. But that didn't go anywhere. I think the very first time somebody proposed an implementation of a technology without actually mentioning, if you read that paper that Satoshi, whoever that person is, floated out there, it doesn't say the word blockchain. If you were to draw the essence of that process, the mathematics of that process, it's a blockchain technology. And that's where it kicked off. And the only reason it became that popular after Satoshi wrote that paper is because the adoption. You know what? There's so many good technologies in the world. They never see light of day because nobody adopts them. Nobody likes them on a mass level. And then once it became acceptable to so many people started to think about what other things we could use this for. But I personally, honestly speaking, I could tell you that I know who made it. I don't. I think it's over time it was built, and then I think one person took it upon himself to say, okay, I'm going to use it in this way.
Raj, I want to ask you, are you familiar with the HyperLedger Linux Foundation project? What is the goal of that?
If you were to develop blockchain technology in 2008, you would have to write the whole code all by yourself. Now, what it does is it provides you a framework. That's a very typical in the software industry. Whenever something becomes more popular, industry comes together, it builds a kind of a standard around it or a framework around it that people could use those modules to exercise. So right now, if I were to make a website, I would say, hey, I need to make a login and a password on this application. All I can do is just pick up a module, plug it in, and now I have a authentication process to it. I don't have to write that all down. So what HyperLedger does, or for that matter, what Ethereum does, provides you a framework to develop blockchain technologies. Because they're backed by different companies, endorsed by different companies, it has credibility. And then those companies are then building their platforms that are compatible to HyperLedger developed applications. So it gets that kind of an acceptance in the marketplace. It's a framework.
Mm-hmm. I see. Looking ahead, do you think like in the coming years, all the transactions with multiple parties would be transformed into blockchain?
I think what will happen is there are disruptive technologies and there are transformative technologies. Disruptive technologies makes what you do better, exponentially better. So you're able to do it way, way better than what you used to do before. Transformational technologies, what they do is they transform the way you work. So they take a little bit time initially. I think in the near future, I'm talking 1 to 2 years, you will see 2 or 3 major applications of blockchain that will get mass adoption. I'm looking at 5 years to 10 years. I think blockchain will become the cornerstone of the online business. Everything and every process that has blockchain implementation would have been converted into that, or would be in the process of being converted. But also businesses also have to now change their business models to adopt to this new technology.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, what is it that you would like to communicate to our listeners about blockchain?
So there's a couple of things I would like to say. First of all, blockchain gives an opportunity for a lot of new businesses. If you miss the chance to create a new business, a new online business or e-commerce or whatever you think you missed out on, and now your time is gone, you now got another chance and better. So you will be able to. There are a lot of possibilities. Every business process is up for some level of transformation and disruption, and you can then use your resources to do it. Number one. Number two, it's easy to jump on this bandwagon as compared to what it was in 1999 or 1993 when internet started. This is a second chance for a lot of people. If you want to start your own business, yes. And the third, I would say, is do not assume that this is going to be one more technology that's going to just make things better. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Review what business you're in, tune in, because it's coming to the theater near you. You like it or you don't, in a good way or a bad way, it is going to affect you. And fourth is, if you're not a technology person and have never coded in your life, do not know how computer code works, you can spend 2 months or 3 months or 1 month even online, understand this, and then create something which is extremely valuable, which you never thought you would be able to do. Even if you are in geology, I'm saying if your industry is very far away from technology, of any sort of technical connection, you can. This is your chance. You can do this.
Well, that was great, Raj. Thank you so much for your time. Both Dan and I, we really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure our listeners would enjoy this equally as well.
Yeah, Raj. This was a great one. This was really just a level deeper. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Manjeet and Dan, for the opportunity. And I'm happy to do this.
Thank you.
Raj.